All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another We've Read the Documents live stream. I'm your host, Sharp Briston. Thank you for being a subscriber. Today, I have with me yet again, fellow brother in Christ and dear friend, Aaron Fochman from Underground Publishing. I recommend that you guys go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's starting a series in depth on exposing rising Christian nationalism in America, on its origins and everything like that, and something that we've both discussed over this channel over the many months and years as well, together and separate in our own veins of research. So God bless you, Aaron. Glad to have you back, brother.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Good. Got a couple of clips I want to play. We can discuss, and we can talk about what we think is going on. And the first one being something I sent you yesterday, which is the Newsmax correspondent and journalist Abraham Jacob Turkeltaub giving a question to Caroline Levitt. I'm not going to give any context because I want to play it live to get everybody's, reacting to this comment, and then we'll discuss it real quick, brother. Okay, if that makes sense to you.
Sure.
All right, let's go.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Carolyn. I've got two
Hi,
quick
Jake,
questions.
and then we'll go to you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Two quick questions. Back to the ballroom. It is a very spectacular ballroom, according
Thank
to the
you.
renderings. And if it's half as nice as the one at Mar-a-Lago, then future presidents are really going to appreciate it.
They will. Thank you, Jake.
First of all,
such.
is there like an official name? Like, are we calling it the Trump Ballroom, or does the president have a vision for what the name for the ballroom is going to be?
There will be an official name. I will let the president announce that once he firmly decides on it.
My second question is, looking at these renderings, and it kind of got me thinking, he's likely going to go down as the greatest builder of this era, and you've been in on a lot of those meetings with him. Has, to your knowledge, has the subject of rebuilding the Holy Temple in Jerusalem come up?
It has not. No. It has
You
not.
don't know what his thoughts on that would be.
I don't. I'm sorry, Jake. Go ahead.
Thoughts, Aaron? Thoughts?
No, we're field testing a couple of new slogans. We want to see if anyone will notice. Is Trump the Antichrist? Hey, we just have a question for you. Is Trump going to usher in the end times this administration, or are you the one who is to come, or shall we wait for another?
I mean, to me, that's a direct question, right? At this point, right?
At that point, it's just like, how dumb are the Christians in America who are still voting for Trump? The Jews are now. Is he going to rebuild the temple? Is he planning to make an image of himself to set in the Holy of Holies by chance?
Is he Cyrus the Great?
I know they're calling them Cyrus the Great. Man, come on, like they're just field testing these dumb ideas to see how bad America is. Like, it's like, we talked about this online, and I'm of the opinion that Satan tests the church, and he's allowed to harm the church when he gives due warning of things that the church should be well aware of. And these people are like, you can't be a Christian and vote Democrat, but you can vote Republican, when they're starting to get really close to basically saying, we're the party of the Antichrist now. Because the Democrats aren't ever going to rebuild the Temple of Jerusalem. And that's something that your average Christian doesn't know, because they've destroyed all teaching on eschatology in the church. But all the early church understood that the Antichrist would rebuild the temple for the Jews. Mm-hmm. Or he would make way for the Jews to build the temple. He would support that, and then ultimately sit in it and claim to be the Messiah. So the fact that they're calling him King Cyrus, who also supported the Jews building the temple, it's a lot of really loud dog whistles that they're saying we would like this guy to be our Messiah. And Cyrus was called a Messiah. That's what people don't realize. With Jewish interpretation, they hold to the idea of multiple messiahs, multiple anointed ones. And even if you look at the Calvinist Standard Version, the ESV, they actually changed Daniel 9 to say from the rebuilding of the wall to the coming of an anointed one, rather than the coming of the Messiah, like every other translation says. It says, hold on, let me pull that up real quick. So it says 70 weeks are decreed about your city to finish the transgression, yada, yada, yada. And it says, know therefore and understand from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. And for 62 weeks it will be built again with squares and a moat, but in troubled times. And they totally changed Daniel 9. This is the ESV. Because an anointed one, a prince, could be the high priest. And they could just say, well, the 49 years are for the rebuilding the temple, and the 62 weeks are for until the wall is rebuilt. Of course, none of that stuff makes sense because it would be 62 times 7 years, and it's like, where does this take you to? It's a completely messed up translation, but the fact that they change it to an anointed one suggests that the term Messiah is not really an exclusive to just Jesus Christ being the Messiah. And that Bible is being popularized among evangelicals and Catholics now. So the Jews have held for a while there being multiple messiahs. Obviously, Cyrus was a messiah. David was a messiah. They would consider even the priest, any anointed one, could be a messiah. And they could say that Trump is a messiah without necessarily saying he's God.
Yeah,
because he doesn't. It's not until he sits in the temple and shows himself off as God. And they could be like, oh, he's a Messiah. He is an anointed one, and that language is being used by David or Steve Bannon. He's a divinely doesn't he use the term anointed?
yes, they've used it before for him. Yes,
But I think in his recent interview where he said Trump's going to get a third term, I'm
yes,
pretty sure he's saying he's divinely
he
anointed.
does. We're gonna play that.
Yeah, I mean, when in Trump's first election, and this is the first time I ever got attacked by Christians for, showing the warning about the Republican Party, there was a guy claiming, we're going to purge America of all evil, and there was a Jewish rabbi online who was calling Trump a Messiah for America. That language of an anointed one, anointed by God, that anointing only can be applied to somebody who either has the Holy Spirit resting on them like Christ did, or like Saul did before the Holy Spirit was removed, right? The Lord's anointed, or somebody who's actually had oil put on them by like a prophet or priest, to be anointed king or something like that, right? That because oil literally it's symbolic for the Holy Spirit, or it's literal oil. Anointed only means somebody who's had oil smeared on them, right? Yeah. So the idea that Trump was not elected, he was anointed. He's, God has chosen him. Well, you could kind of say that about all people, but the idea that the Holy Spirit is resting on them in their office is an entirely different thing. Now, could he be anointed in the way like King Saul is anointed? Maybe. I mean, God does turn the king's hand whatever way turn the king's heart whatever way he wills. And every authority that's in place is there by God, but then that would apply to Barack Obama and every other person, right? So it either applies to all leaders or it applies to no leaders, unless we're talking about people related to, the biblical anointed ones that need to come to fulfill prophecy. So just the use of that language in the public square, plus we're talking about building a temple. This is all stuff that should be major red flags for the Christians, enough to give them major pause in everything that the Republicans are doing. But instead, we're seeing this increasing section of the populace saying all full speed ahead, right? We're making America great again. We're cleansing it from evil. It's like that rhetoric is getting louder and louder and louder.
Yes, agreed. So let's play that Stephen Bannon clip real quick for everybody, the one that you just referenced.
Well, he's going to get a third term. So Trump 28. Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is. But there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will. And you can tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term. right? And he'll get that in 28.
You're not driving me crazy. I'm trying to understand the coherence of the things you've just told me in the last few minutes. On the one hand, you've said the Constitution is fit for purpose. Secondly, you've said that President Trump needs another term, even though the 22nd Amendment makes pretty clear that he cannot have another term.
Why does it make that clear?
Because he's on his second term already.
At some point in time, we will make sure we go through, Zanny, and define all those terms.
But even if you find a way to undermine you will be undermining the spirit of that amendment, even if you find some way around it. And to those
Can the American people, if the American people, with the mechanisms that we have, put Trump back in office, are the American people tearing up the Constitution? Would that be tearing up?
Well,
would the American people be going against the spirit of the Constitution, ma'am?
I think yes, actually, because I think what you will end up with is a populist justification for.
So about all that, like,
he's advocating mob rule. I mean, direct democracy of the people, saying, screw the Constitution, we want this guy in power again. There's a reason why we put term limits on, okay? Though that term limit was an unofficial tradition started by George Washington, because they understood it doesn't take that long for a president to become a dictator.
Correct. A king.
Yes. So, and they wanted him to be king.
Correct. Yes.
And so, out of respect for what George Washington did, every president after that, until we get to Roosevelt in World War II, just out of respect, does their 2 terms and they're done, right? Just so people know, Hitler was only in power a total of 12 years.
Yeah.
He was 12 years and 38 days. He was made chancellor in 1933. He committed suicide in April of 1945. Okay, so chancellor was basically like a prime minister to the president. Okay, so you have the chancellor and then you have the president, and he was chancellor under von Hindenburg, and then von Hindenburg dies. Okay, I just covered this in my video. Von Hindenburg dies in 1934. Everything the Nazis did, think about this, everything the Nazis did, and the world is moving much more slowly with much more openness 100 years ago, right? Everything they did to convert Germany into a war machine, start a world war, and then pull off a Holocaust of millions. Not just the Jews, the Poles, the Gypsies, right? They started out with homosexuals, gypsies, socialists, right? Because that's who really they used to get in power, is to say Weimar Germany was on its way to becoming another Soviet. I mean, it was a socialist republic that started at the end of World War I. It only lasted about 12 years, but it was on its way to becoming a socialist republic. And then von Hindenburg was an old World War I lieutenant general who, swung things back towards the right. The Nazis were extreme right, but if you look at the Republican Party right now, well, you could say, well, Trump is a more right-leaning, but he started out as a Democrat, so maybe he's just more of a moderate pragmatist. People might think that way. Yeah, but who is he surrounded by? People who are further right. And occultists, just like Hitler did. And sycophants, just like Hitler did. And,
and I do want to say real quick, to that point, for the rise of Hitler, you had beforehand, Bolshevikism and communism being spread throughout the world, right? And there were, powerful Jewish influences in Bolshevikism. And you had the Weimar Republic beforehand that was leftist, progressive, and, degeneracy, which led to that rise of Hitler and Nazi Germany, which is very similar to what we've been gone through the last decade, with increase of liberalism and degeneracy as well too, being pushed through the quote-unquote culture war to bring people back into right-left paradigm politics to get them to push that front and center, which led to the rise of Trump coming into power.
Right. And I mean, when we're talking about ICE being given a budget, I like to call them ICE because it sounds like SS. I mean, they're given a $34 billion budget to build detention centers over the next 4 years. That's a massive amount of money. And what are you going to do with $34 billion worth of infrastructure? Because supposedly these guys are just going to be detained, processed, and deported, right? So that's a lot of money, and that's a lot of camps being built. And we're not just the flow is heading towards more detentions because as we speak, I think it's the 27th is when the SNAP benefits end, right? 3 days from now.
Or close to the first. I've heard conflicting reports saying that they have to be paid out by the federal government. However, many state and local governments, including one government close to me, South Carolina, is warning their population that they will not get their payments November 1st.
Well, and the government shutdown is a part of that.
Correct.
Because
Yes.
they're going
Agreed.
to say if the government shut down, we're not paying this stuff out. And people don't realize if you've never lived in a place like a Charlotte, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there are tons and tons and tons of people of a certain skin tone that are on welfare benefits and have never known life without those welfare benefits, right? That are used to and I've seen this firsthand. They're wheeling up to the, not even this is why you have these stores in the ghettos that charge exorbitant prices for groceries and stuff like that, right? Because a lot of these people don't have cars. They take the bus, so they're going closest to their own house. And they're going to pay 3-4 times what we would pay for groceries to buy a bunch of junk food. And I personally
prefer that you have that in the Appalachians for the poor whites as well.
Yeah, you have it with poor whites too. It's but there are large segments of the population that vote left, right?
Yes.
That are accustomed to getting those benefits, and I've seen the massively obese diabetic on a mobile chair because she can't walk through the grocery store, buying pop and ice cream and all that stuff on food stamps. I've personally seen that, and it's like, yeah, it is white people too, but I wouldn't even say it's a majority of poor blacks. I don't know the stats on it, but I do know there's a lot. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about a large segment of the population where we already see people fighting in the streets, mobbing to go loot stores because they're not being prosecuted for it. And what we've seen, what we know, at least about like Walmarts and stuff like this, because that's where they're saying they're going. We're going to go raid Walmart and get our groceries, right? Well, Walmart's just going to sit there and go, okay, you got to get to $1,000 before we can charge you with a felony. And we're just going to use facial recognition technology because guess what? We've been swiping your benefits card with your name on it for a while. We know exactly who you are, and you come in and you're stealing all this stuff now. And now you're up to $1,000. You're going to prison. And the prisons are going to quickly get overfilled and they'll be like, hey, we've got these detention centers. And since we've got a lot of these guys deported, and they probably are building way more detention centers than they need, what we're witnessing is a massive overhaul of the U.S. demographic. Remember, what were they saying on the right? They're going to let all these people in, and then they're going to give them amnesty, and then they'll all vote Democrat, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so where's the pendulum swinging? Well, we're going to get rid of all these people that were supposedly to vote Democrat, and we know a lot of these illegal immigrants were actually hardworking family people who are like, no, there's no job opportunities here, and in America, if you pay your taxes and keep your head down, you can work and support a family. And they're not the welfare mentality. They're actually the kind of people who would vote right wing, and they want to keep more of their taxes, and they want to, have people work to earn theirs, right? Well, you're getting rid of all those people because they're illegal, and then you have all these other people who are just like, we deserve entitlements because we breathe, and have never tried to get a job in their life, or have been in and out of prison since they were teenagers, or have never known a father, and just all these, there's massive cultures of people in every major city where it's just like project housing and Section 8 and all this stuff that the government's like, this is going away. And in other countries, you've always had poor people like this, but there's a lot of Arabs receiving these benefits. There's a lot of people who come in here from, Somalia and places like that who are receiving these benefits and milking this to the hilt. And a lot of them vote Democrat. And you're going to see them targeting, what are we looking for? More right-wing power. And guess what? They can take away your right to vote if you're a felon. So you're putting people into a position where what are you going to do? It's not like there is going to be a bunch of job creation. Well, there's job creation on the farms picking, rutabagas, right? So go bust yourself out to the farms and pick rutabagas for a living. They're not going to do that. They're going to try to mob in the streets and steal, basically. And then they're going to be in the camps. And once they're in the camps, they're going to be like, tell you what, you want out? You can earn your way out by going out to the farms and picking rutabagas. And we're going to go back to a de facto slave economy again. And what people don't realize is indentured servitude with a lot of poor whites and a lot of African slaves working side by side on the farms was a thing in our country's founding. And what are they talking about getting back to? The good old days of our country's founding, right? They're setting up the economic circumstances for that. And unless there are people going out to the camps and figuring out, okay, maybe it's not wise to dox all these ICE guys because maybe the left will attack them. But it's also not wise to give them carte blanche so nobody questions who they are and what they're doing. Because the Nazis who were putting people into concentration camps, people knew who they were. They weren't masked. You're talking about people who nobody knows who they are. And you don't know if this person is... I mean, remember, we just got the defunding of the police in all these Democrat cities, right? Mm-hmm. Who do you think ICE filled its ranks with?
Well, anybody and everyone right now because they're giving such large sign-on bonuses. But I would say primarily former law enforcement, former military.
Yep, the same kind of guys who would have gone to work for Blackwater,
yes,
but
correct.
we don't have all that work in Iraq and Afghanistan, these other theaters anymore, right?
Yes.
They're the same kind of people who used to work for Blackwater and XE or Triple Canopy and these other companies.
So
Academy, yeah, it's all the same thing. But I mean, it's the same talent pool of guys. They all hire the same, mercs, right? So you're going to have mercs, and then you're going to have a bunch of ex-law enforcement, and then, let's talk about Duluth, Georgia, and the Rapid Response Squad and the training of SWAT and riot police all over the country that's been going on since 2008. Mm-hmm. I have some firsthand experience with that.
And I want to say, trained by
military,
Israeli police forces as well too. They brought over Israeli police and Israeli military and Israeli Mossad to train local law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, and where I was, I mean, I met one person who was ex-Air Force and one person was an ex-Green Beret. So they're definitely pulling in military and having military train the police. They have been giving, and this has been going on since 9/11. They're building up, local militaries and sheriff's departments to have things like armored personnel carriers and things like that, right? Not tanks, but pretty close. We're getting close to, and... now Trump's talking about having. Did he ever have his military parade, or is that?
No, he did. He did have his military parade. I gotta find something where they. Let me talk for a minute, but I gotta find where they recently released a purchase order for ICE, and it was like things like guided missiles.
Yeah, what does ICE need guided missiles for? And see, this is the kind of stuff where, again, somebody who's going to be closer to the stuff, like I would love to have somebody start a channel out there just because there are people who are starting channels that are like, hey, the homeless are disappearing. Unfortunately, those channels are super left-wing and having people who are like, the reporters a tranny and stuff like that. And this is unfortunate. Like, this is where it's going. We don't have moderate or conservative people that are saying, hey, where are these people going and how are they being treated? Because we do have laws in this land where illegal immigrants are afforded due process, right? And we would not want the same thing happening to Americans in other countries, right? Someone overstays their visa, and next thing they know, they're in some prison getting buggered in the shower, right? Like,
yeah,
we would want some humane treatment because it's reciprocity, right?
Yes.
And, there's, I don't know if you saw like the proverb that I sent to you today, but I was just reading this in my walking. It says, this is Proverbs, I think 25:11. It says, deliver those who are being taken away to death and those who are staggering to slaughter. Oh, hold them back. if you say, see, we did not know this, does he not consider it who weighs the heart, and does he not know who keeps your soul, and will he not render to man according to his work? In other words, this is the Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? Nobody spoke out when it was the homosexuals and the Jews and the, whatever. And when it was down to me, there was nobody left to speak for me, right? He is saying you are going to reap what you sow. And we as Christians should be concerned about how these human beings are being treated, even if they broke the law.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a whole lot of people in America that have broken laws. I mean, everybody who's pirated a video is subject to FBI imprisonment.
Correct.
And years ago, God convicted me of that. Years ago, when it was just so common, it was so easy.
Yeah, I stopped pirating stuff as well. I got the same conviction.
And I had a dream one night where I was just sitting here in a house with a bunch of teenagers, and somebody popped in a DVD that was a burner, and we had SWAT raid us, take us all to prison. And I woke up with the words in my ear, arbitrary enforcement. Arbitrary enforcement is when you create laws that are so easy to break, almost everyone does, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody speeds, right? Everybody speeds at some point in time. What if every time you sped, the camera's going to tag you and you're going to get a fine and you're bankrupt, right? They have the cameras. We pass them all the time through the red lights and the yellow lights. How many of us have tried to make it through that yellow light that turned red, right? They have the cameras. They do take the picture. They could enforce it, but they don't, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the people stealing at Walmart, and we're going to wait till you get to $1,000 into felony before we enforce it. They're doing that with all of us on speeding. Now, I know a buttload of Christians who have made income off of using illegal means to get to get housing loans, to multiply real estate for rentals or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to borrow the down payment from grandpa who's rich, and that because often you have to prove you have the down payment, but typically when you get the loan, often the loan is enough where you don't actually need the down payment. And then you can give the money back to grandpa, right? Mm-hmm. And I know people are doing that. People are getting that second house. You're supposed to have a house for 2 years established, and you're supposed to be living it. And I know people who would live with their parents, getting their second and third rental while they're still living with mom and dad and lying about where they're living, right? And then the same people are over here flipping cars for a living while driving those cars on vacation all over the country and writing it down as a tax write-off as if they're going to a business meeting on Facebook, showing off their motorcycle or their car.
Didn't they just indict Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, as going after Trump for something very similar to what you're discussing?
And that's the point. Arbitrary enforcement, okay? So when I had this dream, this had to be at least 15 years ago about the pirating thing. God showed me is like, they could right now be like, hey, we're going after all these Democrats for all this stuff. Well, wait a minute. What did they go after Trump for? Lying to get loans. Oh, but he paid back the loan, so it's an okay lie. No, it's not an okay lie. There are ripple effects to that, and those ripple effects can include a housing crash one day that happens with millions of people losing their homes because they made it so easy for so many people to lie about their income to get the loan that millions of people lied about their income to get the loan, and some of them paid off the house and they did fine, right? But other people who were doing everything legally and legitimately, like myself, I went bankrupt on student loan debt. That was the only debt I had, and the only reason I went bankrupt on it is because I transferred it over to credit cards that were giving me like 0% interest for a year and a half when I was stuck taking out a bank loan because I couldn't qualify for a FAFSA loan because I had worked full-time and I made too much money. So they wouldn't give me a FAFSA loan, so I had to take out a 12% interest loan to finish off college quickly. And next thing you know, I'm bankrupting on that money within like 5 years. Now, these systems are set up, and when you say, oh, it's just a little white lie, it's like you don't see the ripple effects of that. When I was a teenager and I was shoplifting, I didn't see the ripple effects of everybody's price goes up, 25 cents on a CD because of the 10 CDs you stole last week, right? I didn't see that I'm stealing a quarter out of 100 people's pocket. You don't think like that, right? Or you think it's only a quarter, who cares, right?
Yeah.
Until you realize that it's just like, yeah, but if 100 people start doing what you're doing, now everybody's paying a double. Now it's $15 out of every person's pocket. Okay? Where does it stop when people keep doing it? And then you get to the point where it's like, now it's happening. We know there's tons of people who cheat on their taxes, tons and tons and tons of people who cheat on their taxes, but here's the problem. It is more costly to prosecute someone for tax evasion than the amount of money you're going to collect on tax evasion, right? Until you get to a place where we can confiscate your land, foreclose on your house, all this other stuff because you're in jail and you can't pay down the house, right? And all of a sudden, all the people who are in league with, BlackRock and all these people are just like, hey, you know what? If you prosecute everyone that's cheating on their taxes and they go to jail and they can't pay down their house, we can get all those houses and we could put them in these retirement accounts and you'll make a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it becomes beneficial to, they're spending tons of money deporting illegal immigrants, right? That are making the prices of foods go up because these people were working the farms and doing a lot of, cheap residential labor, fixing and landscaping and all this other stuff, construction labor, right? All these things are going to go up in price because these illegals are going. Now, I'm not advocating that we should do that, but there's a reality that we needed the market, the economy needed a lot more immigrant labor than we were allowing in. That's why it happened, right? The market demanded it. And we had years and years to see this coming and go, okay, we need to let a lot more people in with a lot lower barriers to entry, right? Okay, so why didn't we do it? The people in power know what they're doing. They know, they're like, no Americans will do these jobs, and so therefore, you want to bet, take them off the food stamps and they will do these jobs. You're talking about people who intentionally get pregnant 5 times by the time they're 20 and then spend the rest of their life on welfare. That is reality. That is reality in every inner city in America. There are women who've been, the first one was a rape, the 5th one was a strategy. Now they're incentivized to never get married because they can't have a man in the house if they're going to get that money, and to basically just keep being a hoe and multiplying kids who have no father figures. I mean, that's been going on for 50 years. So it's like you've produced an entire generation of people who have no good sense because of the way that they're raised and the way they came into this world. And because they were disincentivized, it was either eat or have a father figure, right? Like, we created this problem. You can't tell me there weren't people that one day said, one day these people are going to replace the Mexican immigrant labor on the farms and we're going to put them back in chains. Because there's no way these people are just like, we're just going to let these people just breed like rabbits and just pay all their bills forever. And there's no way that was it. The people knew how much money was going out the door for welfare and food stamps in Section 8. There's no way this is just going to happen into perpetuity. I mean, we got phone calls all the way back recorded with Nixon in the 70s going, hey, if we do this and this and this, we'll get everyone to pay these higher premiums for health care, but not actually use the health care for anything. They were thinking like that at the presidential level back in the 70s. So now what do we have? We have health care that costs, right, hundreds of dollars a month for you to have something that you can't touch unless you have over $10,000 worth of medical work that you need done before you get any benefits from it, right? So who's going to intentionally get to the point where they've spent $7,000 on top of the $4,000 they've had to pay for the health care to get to the point where they're actually getting some benefits from the health care plan? Mm-hmm. So you're giving some insurance company $4,000 a year for virtually nothing unless you have over $10,000 a year of medical needs, which your average person, if you're taking care of your health, you're going to avoid using that altogether and also pay for the plan. They have calls recorded with Nixon planning that kind of thing back in the 70s. So the idea that these people weren't sitting here and looking at the long-term effects of when they get an entire generation of people who were raised on nothing but welfare, well, now what do you do when you take away the welfare? They're not just going to keep them in prisons. That's just another welfare system. They're going to figure out a way to convert them back into slave labor. And we had deep-seated racism in this country. And it's not, obviously, the rich don't, when it's the poor, they don't discriminate on color, right? But there happens to be a certain color of people that are historically have a lot more poor, right? Because they came from slaves. Our country's not that old. And these kind of conversations have been being had by people in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, today, and now we're at a point where it was like, you could see it as soon as they unleashed the streets, right? Like, let them burn down the cities, let them set up druggie camps all over the country, defund the police, let's give them everything the left is saying to give them. Do you think there aren't people on the left and the right saying, okay, this is unsustainable. Yeah, but we're going to do this, and then they're going to scream for more police and more order, and then we're going to do Y, right?
Yeah.
There were always people on the left and the right who are shaking hands and saying, we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to cause our nation to survive, because we have been literally creating funny money since Nixon. Right? All the way back to being pulled off the gold standard and basically saying we're just the good faith and trust of the United States government. The government that's always launching false flag wars, and we're always involved in overthrows of nations for the benefits of certain rich elites in our country who have vested interests in their natural resources. Like, the good faith of that is going to be what the world economy is balanced on. The too big to fail industry is the U.S. government, and yet we went forward in doing this, and it was always a Ponzi scheme. It's always got to collapse at some point in time. And the question is like, okay, well, what are we going to transition over to when it collapses? And that's what we're seeing happen right now. It's like, when you look at Germany and the amount of impact it had on the global economic system was very little compared to the U.S. I mean, Germany was a pretty strong industrial power, but they didn't have a massive colonial empire, and they didn't have a massive economic impact on the rest of the world. Most of what Germany did was with the resources they had on hand. The U.S. is different because we have hooks in so many other nations, and so many other nations have hooks in us, that if we go down, the entire world order goes down with us. Mm-hmm. And so there's so much more we can get away with. And whatever we're being converted into, and I'm of the opinion that we're going to be converted back into world colonies for the outside world, which is I read this in my Christian nationalism video I did yesterday from Isaiah 18, how it talks about the beasts of the earth, the big branches of this tree being lopped off and the beasts of the earth resting on them, wintering on them, versus being under their shade, which is the big tree always represents the world power, and this is the last days prophecy, like right before the Lord returns. I think America is going to go back to being colonies. I think the West is going to be colonies for economic partners in the East, and primarily China and their Latin American allies, and the East is going to become colonies for probably England and maybe Europe and their allies, maybe Arabs as well, right? America goes from being a bunch of poor people pulling raw materials out that are going to be used in the big war, which is Armageddon, which is ultimately going to be centered around the Middle East. All the money starts flowing back that way instead of this way. And that seems to be what the Bible forecasts is how the end is going to go. Well, we're watching the new order transition from the U.S. to the Middle East as we speak, when we see the construction of NEOM that's going on. And now we're hearing very openly them talk about Gaza being a haven for billionaires. They're going to be building a brand new beachfront property for billionaires in Gaza. They're going to be, they're going to build the the water reclamation plants and the desalinization plants, and they're going to plant the gardens, and they're going to pull the trees from all over the world and ship them there. We're talking about Mystery Babylon. We're talking about this thing that we're building. We're building a place for the rich to isolate themselves from the poor, while the U.S., I think, and Russia get reduced to people living in squalor, digging up natural resources, just like Africa.
Yeah.
And then all the money and all the power is centered around basically Europe and the Middle East. Like it was in the Roman Empire, right? Like, this is always where it was heading, because the Bible said the Roman Empire was going to be the last empire.
Do you believe that America's a revived Roman Empire?
No, I think we're holding the
We're the placeholder?
Yeah, it's like you're in a relay race and we're holding the baton right now. I think you can make an argument that a number of different countries have held that baton, but the final Roman Empire is actually going to look like the Roman Empire geographically. I mean, there's a lot of new money in America because there's a lot of natural resources here. Well, there's a lot of new money in China because there's a lot of resources there, right? Like, there's a lot of rich people in Russia, even though Russia seems poor in terms of major economy. There's always rich people where the natural resources are, and those cowboys and pioneers who go out there and get close to the natural resources, they get rich. But ultimately, they want to have their seat at the table back where the old money is, right? And the old money of the world is in Europe, and increasingly now among the Arabs, because they've had now multiple generations of oil wealth, right?
Yeah.
And they're converting all that towards enticements for the rich to move there. They're not building Section 8 housing. They're building high rises, right?
Yeah.
And people have been looking at this for 20 years and going, what are they doing building all these high rises and these island beachfront properties and all this stuff? Who's going to live there? And the answer is all the rich from all over the world. When the New World Order comes and the Old World Order falls apart and it's too dangerous for them to live there. I mean, we're already seeing the billionaires talking about building bunkers all over the place, right? So they're not going to just live in the bunkers and go away.
Yeah.
That's a temporary measure for when America falls apart. And I mean, there's so much firsthand communication about these bunkers being built for the rich. And it's like, well, what are they going to do? Well, that's what they're going to do while America falls apart. Well, where are they going to reemerge? Well, some of them, there is an underground thing going on, I believe, that is going to turn into a long-scale millennial thing. But a lot of them are going to reemerge and go to places like Gaza and Neom, I think, and Dubai, and you know what I mean? Like, that's going to be, I mean, let's face it, it's beachfront property all over the place. And I can tell you, I live in a desert. You can control a desert so much easier than you can control other places. You know why?
Well, you need water primarily, so that's
because you'll die if you lose your house.
Yeah.
I mean, places that are really hot or really cold are easy to keep crime down.
And the temperature swings in the desert as well, too, right? Like, you need shelter in the desert to practically survive.
Exactly. So if you got cameras around, it's not like these people can just go out and live in the wilderness and then come in and attack, caravans like they could, hundreds of years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're all on highways. You're driving cars fueled by oil. You're coming in and out of cities. When they create this slave labor force out of the Gazans, which they're going to do, they're going to create a slave. They're already talking about building, it's in Jared Kushner's plan to build, I guarantee it's going to be like Section 8 trailer park housing or whatever for these guys out in the Negev, which I've been to. It's straight up desert, super hot during the day, cold at night, right?
Yeah.
You're not walking out of there. Dehydration alone will kill you. You're dead if you don't have a ton of water. Well, where are you going to get the water from? Well, they'll make sure you have water in the Section 8 housing, but not anywhere outside, right? And you can only carry so much water with you. So how are you going to get out of there outside of official means of transport that they control? And the answer is you're not. You're going to be basically a service labor force who lives in these poor ghettos, and if you behave yourself properly, you'll go work in Richville, right? And we've been seeing this. I mean, these futurist video games and stuff like that, like You know, if you remember the Final Fantasy video games and all this stuff, all these video games that we've been having, these futuristic concepts with like robot warfare and all this stuff, it's the world run by corporations, and there's this massive gap between the rich and the poor, and they ride these trains that are all, you know, monitored with technology and stuff like that to make sure, you know, if you're a rebel, if you're trying to start the revolution, they will find you, right? And it's always this kind of cyberpunk world where it's like the poor are living in these squalor situations. I mean, it's the checkerboard, right? The poor are living in these squalor situations in the black zones, and the rich are living in these super posh places in the white zones. But the one thing you don't want to do in the white zone is get kicked out. Because it's not like you go from being rich to upper middle class.
So do you think that's what's going to end up eventually happening to Gaza, in that you're going to have a Palestinian quote unquote slave labor force, but you're going to remove Hamas and sell them to, you know, they're going to be removed and go to Saudi Arabia. They're
Yeah,
going to
I
go
think
to
Hamas is going to where the Houthis are, and they're going to continue to harass sea traffic in the Red Sea. And the reason they are is because most of that sea traffic is going to be Chinese manufacturers towards Europe.
Yeah.
And so the Indian traffic, which is going to be the lower level chip manufacturers and manufactured goods that would go to Europe and the Middle East, is going to go through Abu Dhabi and Dubai, through Saudi Arabia, towards Israel, Syria, into Europe, by land, by rail. They're already planning this. This is all Netanyahu's been talking about it. Kushner's been talking about all this stuff. And then they have the Oxagon on Neom, which is supposed to be basically this massive, kind of like a floating city of factories where ships can just pull right into it, load up with manufactured goods, and pull right out of it. And their plan is to make it, you know, the best of the best automated manufacturing and stuff like that, right? Well, you're always going to need human labor until you get to the point of peak automation. It takes time to, you know, automate every last process and stuff. Factories are getting pretty good, but they never start out with everything like that. They need hands to lift and do things until, you know, they get everything tweaked, right? And then also you need the actual building of the physical infrastructure, right? So you need the building of the physical infrastructure of Neom, of Oxagon, and the plan is to eventually create an economy. Let's face it, almost everything's made out of oil-based stuff, right? If it's plastic, right? So where's your oil base? Well, that's right there in the Middle East. And all your plastic goods, they're gonna, you know, silicon's made of sand, right? Like they're building everything towards siphoning the manufacturing towards the Middle East. Well, who's going to be your labor force? Who's going to work in your warehouses like your Amazon workers until they eventually eliminate those jobs? And the answer is going to be poor Arabs, poor Middle Easterners. Now, the Arab people are supposedly subsidized. They're on the government dole, but that could change. But the Palestinians are people who need jobs, and you know they're basically one big welfare state. So the whole world is going away. The whole world is heading towards austerity. We can't just we have a demographic problem worldwide. We can't just keep having whole millions of people on world government dole, right? Like, and Gaza has been a subsidized economy forever, right? It's always been a subsidized economy. They're always getting tons of donations and food and stuff like that. And it's like, well, put them to work. And when you live in a desert, it's not like you can go quit your job because your boss is being a tool, you know, or abusing you, or maybe if you're a woman, you know, saying, yeah, oh, sleep with me or I'll fire you, right? Like that kind of crap is going to go on, and then these people are going to have nowhere to go. You're in a ghetto in the desert. There are no food stamps, there are no government benefits. What are you going to go do? Well, you can go down and be part of the Houthis that are basically going to be harassing the Chinese traffic that are coming through. While that's what they want anyways. They're cutting, right? It's like the three kings who are plucked up out of the economy. Well, what is that? It's the world system, and I believe the three kings that are plucked up are probably something like Russia, Iran, and China that are plucked out of the world economy. It gets to a point where, you know, the benefits of the new world order don't benefit these countries, and so they go gather up the outskirts of the world to go to World War IV, which is Armageddon. So all of this stuff is destined to happen, but we're seeing now the pieces of it fall into place, right? And so we're seeing worldwide austerity. We're seeing, these huge demographic shifts. Like, what are you going to do? It's like I've got a friend whose mom is needing healthcare right now, and the hospitals are drastically understaffed to where the point is she's doing her research to tell the doctors what they should do. Why? Because we made it so hard to be a doctor, and healthcare is so controlled by the insurance agencies. So many people just are like, why would I want to be educated for 12 years of my life just to start doing this? It's not as prestigious as it used to be. It doesn't pay like it used to, and the care isn't there. And, it's just all about the insurance companies. And now we're finding out that we got way more sick people because we've got the boomers all aging out, and they had 5 kids or 6 kids per family. And now we have families that are having 2 kids per family in charge of taking care of them. We need massive amounts of immigration to make this sustainable. And then that immigration is going to be pulled from countries where maybe they have more kids, but they're poorer. It's going to change everything. And so they need these labor forces to come. But what they don't want is these labor forces to take over, right?
Yeah.
We don't want the Palestinians who keep having 8 kids to take over our country because there's more people and it's a democracy. So what are we doing? We're shifting away from democracy. We're getting the people to say democracy is unsustainable because the Mexicans...
being a constitutional republic, not a democracy. There is a difference.
Right, but even that, they can take over, and because they have the numbers, right? I mean, look at what's happening in Minnesota with Somalis. Look at what's happening in Michigan with Dearborn, right? These are Iraqis mostly over here. So the Africans and the Arabs and the Indians don't have tons of kids per family necessarily. They actually are pretty self-controlled about that, but there's just a ton of them. But, you're talking about the Latin Americans, the Africans, and the Arabs have tons of kids, right? The math says if we're democracies, they run everything in 100 years. Just demographically, they take over all the institutions. All they have to do is assert themselves, which is why you have white Christian nationalists saying, have lots of kids, have 5 kids, right? And get involved in politics. It's the exact same thing that Mustache Man was saying in his generation, right? Have lots of kids. We need to make more people or we're going to be overrun by these mongrels. It's just math. And unfortunately, because, in a world where people feared the Lord and also trusted the Lord, they would have more kids. They wouldn't be practicing birth control all the time. They wouldn't have 50 sex partners before they get married. And then by the time they get married, they're, the women can only have a couple kids before their body's shot. So they don't want to have more kids than that, right? Healthy people would have been like, between 20 and 30, maybe having 5 kids. By age 30, they have all their kids. They can get their body back in shape and live a pretty decent life because they're busy taking care of their kids and doing things. We have the means to do all that, but we don't do it.
But society being influenced by Hollywood and, people being entrenched in their own sin as well, too, are leading, and you have, feminism, the various waves of feminism as well, too, destroying the nuclear family and the structure of the nuclear family, which, ends up destroying societies, time and time again, and culture, once you lead to a polyamory, polygamous society,
Right, and we're shot. We're at a point where we've done. It doesn't take long to just throw a society into chaos. I mean, it just takes one bad generation before it's all trashed. Right now, you can also put things back together in a generation. You might have a generation that suffers, and the next generation's doing okay. But we see that, with Israel in the Bible, where it's just like everything's peaked under David and Solomon, and the money's flowing, and everything's great, and then in the next generation it starts falling apart, right? And then everything starts to peak again under Jehoshaphat, right? And then it starts to fall apart, and then it starts to peak again under Uzziah or Hezekiah, and then it starts to fall apart. So it's like, but what we don't see is that those are 100-year swings, right? It's going to take a century to straighten things out. You need people to change their values. Let's face it, Poor people are less likely to go buy condoms.
Well, we need people to become born again. That's the only thing that matters. You
Well,
know.
yeah, but I'm talking just more,
Well, yeah,
just
but I'm talking about as far as influencing a society, right? I mean, degeneracy
well,
is just
and I
continuing.
and I, I'm not talking about that because I'm talking about the practical side of it. I understand what you're saying. Yes, that's the only solution, but that was never going to be the solution because we have a prophesied end times, right? Like the idea of turning everybody to Christ and the world would be great. Of course, the world would be great if everyone turned to Christ, right? But that's not going to happen. Jesus was specific about that, right? So, like, when we look at what's left over, well, what's left over is math and demographics. And math and demographics say, poor people don't go buy condoms because that's just one more expense and they have more kids. It's that simple. When you have less money to go out to dinner and go out to movies and do all this other stuff, what are you going to do for fun? Have sex, make babies. This is just the way the world works. Richer, more affluent people tend to be more self-controlled in how many kids they have. And they tend to be more self-controlled on how quickly they have kids because of the money and expenses. And we get to a point where it's just like, okay, so there's no turning this around. Or if there was a turning this around, we need 100 years to do it. And prophetically, there's just no room for that.
Yeah.
There's too many things going on.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let me play this clip to your point about everything. And I want to mention right here, it says right here, federal contracting record shows that ICE made a $61,218 payment labeled under the product and service code for guided missile warheads and explosive components. There's been a 700% rise in ICE spending on small arms and related equipment in 2025.
Yeah, I would want to know every single thing they're buying. Because I do believe they're preparing them they are becoming an SS. They are becoming an internal military.
Yes, agreed. And then I want to play this of Stephen Miller at Trump's, discussion panel yesterday. You want to call it, or I don't know what you want to call it. All the parts of major parts of Trump cabinet meeting together and having a press conference, I guess is a better way of saying it. So let's play Stephen Miller here for a minute.
To Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller, the leader of this task force.
Let me just say, Mr. President, that this country was going to die without you. This country was going to actually die without you. That's what we were facing in 2024. We've been invaded for 4 years. Our communities were sinking. Our public safety had gone to zero. Cartels were running entire communities. Sex trafficking, child trafficking, labor trafficking was out of control. Overdoses were out of control. The cartels were claiming more and more territory. City services were buckling. This was a country on the verge of dying, and you alone saved it. And when you stepped forward, originally in 2016, you started the movement to make America great again. And that means make America great again in every way. And that means safety and prosperity and peace and freedom from cartels and crime and gangs. And your vision and your leadership in declaring war on the drug cartels is the single most successful public safety initiative in American history. And I need the media to understand what President Trump has done. People have been talking about drug cartels for longer than I've been alive. And everyone has just taken for granted that they can't be touched or stopped. They're too big, they're too powerful, they're too evil, they're too murderous. They can operate with impunity. And in just 9 months, President Trump is the only American leader, not just in our lifetimes, but ever, to actually take the fight to the drug cartels, to actually seek their eradication. And it is happening. And so while the Democrats are shutting the government down and fighting for free health care for illegal aliens, look at what President Trump has assembled here. He's assembled a team under his vision, direction, and leadership that is saving hundreds of thousands of lives. Hundreds of thousands of lives. And only President Trump could have done this. And I will say one last thing, which is that his courage has been an inspiration to everyone else in this room. There are people in this room, looking at, for example, at Todd Lyons, who have been relentlessly doxxed and harassed and threatened. But when they see President Trump's courage, what he's been through for 10 years to save America, when they came after his family, his businesses, his safety, his freedom, everyone at this table knows we can give whatever it takes to get the mission done. So President Trump, thank you for your leadership, your boldness, your courage, and your vision. We're honored to serve underneath you.
Well, I want to thank you, Stephen. And I have to say that, I've been making the rounds. I'm leaving tomorrow for some very big meetings, including with the president of China. where I think we're going to come out very well, and everyone's going to be very happy. But everybody said the same thing. A year ago, we had a dead country. We were a dead country. We really were, in a lot of ways, not just this. We were dead as doornails on this, but we were a country that was in serious trouble and beyond that. And we have the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. The whole world is talking about it. We have the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're going to...
Thoughts?
I mean, it's the same old sycophancy, right? I mean, first of all, what cities in America were taken over by cartels?
None.
None. I got a guy who knows who's moving to El Paso. Like, I've driven through El Paso. People are like, oh, there's crime in El Paso. And yeah, are there drugs making it across the border? Are there? Yes.
Are there cartels operating in America? Of course, yes.
Yeah, of course there are. There's been the CIA is a cartel that was selling crack in America. So of course there is. But the idea that, Mexican drug cartels are taking over whole cities on the border, that's absurd. I've been to it through El Paso. I've been on the border of Arizona. It's just not true. And so like they're making it out to be like, oh, they're invading and overrunning and we need to stop them. Now, check this out. While you're on this, I'm on a thing. ICE is getting ready to hire another 10,000 people, okay? Here's a guy. This is Donald Rihala. He's a Republican in the 7th District of Congress for Wisconsin, okay? He won by 61%. 61% of the vote. Remember how I told you ICE? I call it ICE. Mm-hmm. Here's his post on Facebook. It says, ICE was never meant to be a military force, yet despite this, aided with the Trump administration's expansion of law enforcement priorities, and I don't have Facebook, so I don't have the whole thing, but they're talking about how, here's what ICE is doing. They're raiding farms, and then they're shooting tear gas at the observers. This is important. Maybe these people deserve to be deported because they broke the law. But observers should be able to see what they're doing and making sure they're doing things that they're not torturing people. Mm-hmm. They're not, oh, you got a young daughter with you? I'm going to rape her and nobody can do anything about it because you're an illegal, right? Like, we want to make sure whatever is being done, even if it is legitimate law enforcement, is done humanely.
Yes, you need advocates, you need, lawyers, you need
So the fact that they're shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at the observers and reporters and even Congress people, I don't care if they're left-wing Congress people, they're representatives, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy posts, his response is, ICE, ICE, and then a little baby face. They know what this is. They know exactly what this is. And he's saying, these people are saying, we got to do something about this. It's becoming a military. And he's just like, oh, you guys just have the CNN talking points. It's like, no, you have the Reichstag talking points, right? Because they don't see it. They're like, ICE is a militia. It's becoming a military. It's getting more armed up. They're buying military grade weapons. God knows what for. But the fact that they're shooting tear gas at observers, these aren't rioters. They're observers on a farm out in California.
But what about when we had the George Floyd protests and riots where we had actual riots and
they did nothing.
Trump did nothing, and you had even Raz Simone, right? And he had his self-declared Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone in Seattle, right? An actual quote-unquote self-proclaimed warlord taking over an area.
And
right?
They did nothing.
They did nothing.
Why? Because they wanted it to get bad. Again, this is Captain America, right? Where they talk about Operation Paperclip. What is the name of that movie? The one, Winter Soldier, right? Mm-hmm. Where they talk about Operation Paperclip and they talk about Hydra becoming S.H.I.E.L.D. This is literally about the Nazis slowly integrating into America. And they're telling you what they're doing. We're creating the chaos so that you ask for the Nazis again. That's what they did in Germany. This wasn't organic. This didn't happen organically. I mean, you could say, well, yeah, Marx and Engels were in Germany, and so maybe it was more organic. And it was like, no, these were the natural byproducts of overthrowing all your monarchs, which they succeeded in doing by World War I. It was like the Ottoman Empire, the German Empire, and the Austrian Empire were the last three monarchies to fall in Europe. I mean, you have like little puppet monarchs like in Liechtenstein and stuff like that, but I'm saying They turned everything into republics and into democratic
Well,
republics.
you had the Treaty of Versailles, which stripped Germany of its economy. You had the degeneracy going, through the Weimar Republic, which had a lot of Jewish influence. You had the Bolsheviks and communists, which had a lot of Jewish influence at the time. So you had all of this rising up, and the whipping and the frenzy of the Nazis, and the rising of theosophy and theosophical views, and quote unquote positive Christianity, and the use of the Christian Lutheran Church primarily in Germany to lead up to all that. That's what led to the rise of Nazi Germany.
Right, but what we had before that, again, we had the Plato's Republic style. Once we want a world government like this once upon a time, the Federation of Man talk. We had this going on for a while, and then what you had is as soon as you get capitalism and democracy launch, and then you get the French Revolution, immediately out of this we've got Marx and Engels, and we've got Hegel talking about the thesis, antithesis, synthesis program, right? So what they're talking about doing to get towards their ends, they have been publicizing through philosophers and stuff since like the mid 1800s. If you look at things through a biblical lens of I can read the Bible and read 1,000 years of Jewish history, right? Like, it gives you a perspective of sitting here going 150 years is not that long. 200 years is not that long in history, right? And when you look at America and go, okay, this country didn't happen organically. Rich people, this is so important to know, rich and influential and occult-oriented people from throughout Europe and throughout England moved here and said, we're going to have a revolution and we're going to create a new world order
1776, the new
Right.
Atlantis.
There were people who moved here. Thomas Paine moved here in 1776 and wrote the buzzword that's going around today, common sense, right?
Yep.
If they can do that here, they can do that elsewhere. They can move to a new place and say, we've got the money, the power, and the influence here. Let's start a new world order. And they did that because the opportunity was there, because the 7 Years' War had just happened, and the entire economic order of the world that had existed at that time had been overturned in the 7 Years' War. And coming out of that, all these people, these Freemason-connected people who are dancing with the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians, the Illuminati, the Royal Societies, all these they were their generations, CNP and Council on Foreign Relations and Futurist Society and stuff like that. Their generation's version of them were these guys hobnobbing, saying, let's execute America as Thomas More's Utopia or whatever, right? Like, and then somebody tried to do it in France. Well, wherever you create democracy, you have to balance out the rich and the poor, or it's going to turn to chaos and then a dictator. They knew that way back with Plato's Republic in the 4th century BC. They knew that. You have to balance out the rich and the poor. Otherwise, you're going to have too many poor. And the Roman Republic was the way you do that, right? You had the lower house that basically spoke for the plebes, right? And then the higher house, the Senate, which is basically the conglomerate of richer landholders, right?
The House of Representatives and the Senate.
Right. And so they built a system around that in America. But then in France, they did the exact same thing without all the stopgaps. And you can't tell me that just happened organically, because there were people in England involved in both revolutions on purpose, right? They were experimenting to see how it goes here and see how it goes there. People created revolutionary America, revolutionary France, Nazi Germany, the Soviet Union, the Chinese Communist state. These states were created by people with outside money and influence and power and weapons to see how it goes when you try to control the people this way or try to control the people that way. Which system optimizes for us who have the power and control, to have the most money, the most power, the most control, and what is their goals? Well, their eventual goals, and this goes all the way back to Parmenides and Plato, is to convert all of the world's knowledge into one big brain. That's what the Library of Alexandria was about. Converting all the world's knowledge into one big brain and creating a god. It was always about that. They were trying to do that way back with Alexander the Great. So they're trying to do that now. It was always about that, and it was always about just using the poor to what? Mine the earth's resources to create something. Like, what is your goal? Well, they've been talking about transhumanism and the golem and all this stuff. Like, these ideas go back to pre-flood Egypt. That's how old they are.
Yeah.
We are going to figure out how to transfer souls into new bodies. We are going to figure out how to make ourselves equal with God through knowledge.
Yeah.
It's the lie from the garden. And it has been manifesting itself in ways that are way closer to what we now know as transhumanism from the most ancient past. We're going to do these incantations over you, and we're going to pull out your guts and stuff like that and do all this stuff, and you're going to be Osiris now.
Which AI is helping people do that now. You have
Which
literally
now we're
AI.
figuring out how to do it. We know how the... But if you go back and read Plato's Timaeus from the 4th century, you can tell that these people were dissecting people and figuring out how an eyeball works. And then you can read about that in the Gospel of Thomas. You need to figure out how to make an eye. They're literally going with this transmutation thing we're doing where we're putting, souls into new idols, and it's just all make-believe, right? But it's demons convincing them that it's true, right? Is like, well, I don't want to get transferred into an idol that can't move or talk. You know what I mean?
Transsexuality to transhumanism. I mean, Days of Noah has been exposing that for a very long period of time is what it leads to. And you could say the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, that you and I both discussed, and me being a former Gnostic, there is, pro-transsexual, quote-unquote, transcendence literature of entering into the kingdom of heaven of females becoming male.
Right, and that's all ultimately what it's about, is about controlled transmigration of souls, right? These people have believed in transmigration of souls, again, from antediluvian Egypt at least. I don't know if they believed in that in ancient Sumer, but they definitely did in Egypt, okay? So the idea of people, we want to figure out how to get in and out of the underworld. We want to figure out how to get in out of the heavens, right? The 7 spheres, they called it. The 7 spheres, the 7 heavens, or the 7 layers of the underworld. Yeah, the same kind of talk we have today. It's weird how the buzz language keeps coming back in the exact same form. Well, eventually they're saying that we need to take dominion over the 7 spheres. What does that mean? Well, go all the way back to ancient Sumer and read the Descent of Nana. The 7 spheres for her were the 7 layers of the underworld she needed to get to her dead husband and procreate with him. And what came out of that procreation? Supposedly Nephilim, right? Like, we're going to figure out how to reconnect with our dead loved ones, our soulmates, blah, 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 and still make babies with them. Like, this bizarre stuff, again, it's all demonic lies. But the idea of it being theoretically possible with all the stuff we know from the Bible, I mean, what do we have happen in the book of Revelation? Well, the Antichrist is the branch that's tossed out, right? Well, where is he tossed out of per Isaiah? Sheol. He broke. The reason the Antichrist and the false prophet go straight to the lake of fire and not to Sheol at the end is because he broke him out of Sheol. And what we have, this idea of the image of the beast and the beast ruling, you got to remember, the Antichrist is struck dead, and then it says he lives in the image of the beast, and then it says he and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire. It doesn't say God pulls him out of Sheol and throws him in the lake of fire. He pulls it off. He pulls off somehow. I mean, this is based on just taking the biblical language literally. This doesn't seem to be a false resurrection. It's not a true resurrection, because a true resurrection would be being brought up in an everlasting body that is
perfected
God.
body. Yes, correct.
But they are mimicking it, and they've somehow managed to get the Antichrist's soul from Sheol, or keep it from going to Sheol, one or the other, right? He could be on a life support system and talking through the image of the beast. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But what we have from Ezekiel, I think it's Ezekiel 43, they talk about bodies of your kings in high places, which suggests that the image of the beast is one body and his actual physical body is the other one. So I imagine something like
a hologram.
He's barely alive on life support, but he is actually living and speaking and ruling through the image of the beast.
Yes.
I see that being plausible. And I do see that being as the thing that it's like, now that we can offer you a counterfeit of eternal life, there's no reason for you to be worshiping Jesus. Now we execute Order 66, which is get rid of all the people who, want to follow this alien force thing. And, it's just going to be all about us with our robo bodies. Like, think about the Jedis and the Sith. Who are the ones who are all meddled out, right? The Sith, right? And so we seem to be heading towards there, and we seem to be bleeding into all our literature, all our futuristic sci-fi content. But what most people don't see is how old these ideas are, how old and how dark and how occultic they are. I think they go back to Cain. These ideas of just like controlling how you deal with your afterlife seems to go back to the guilt that Cain bore for killing Abel. And I talk about that in some of my stories on ancient Egyptian stuff that I'm doing related to my Serpent by the Way research. But this stuff is coming to a fore. It's coming to a head. And there's not really any other places that it can maneuver. It's like this desire is here among the ultra rich, and they are willing to sacrifice tons of poor people and, make them eat Soylent Green to get to a point where they can execute their plans. I mean, you're talking about guys who are already proving, like, we will eliminate 300,000 jobs while we take leisure trips on rockets into space.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these people are showing you there is no stopgap. And if you try to do anything to slow us down, we're going to call you a communist and throw you in a camp. Like, this is where it's heading. And what people don't realize is who this country was sold as from the beginning was never just unbridled Republican capitalism. It became that after the Civil War. It was a balance of a whole bunch of different ways of thinking and doing things. And then the goal of the Federalists was to make it all the same and make it that only one way of thinking could be brought into the fore. And basically the people in the South who had the slaves were more traditionalists, and the people in the North were more capitalist.
Yeah.
And then they turned everything towards republicanism, and republicanism had a platform of let's just plow out west and take over all the land from the Indians and monetize everything to get people's minds off of the fact of the Civil War, and we just, ripped through millions of Americans and killed them, right?
So if we're talking about craft prospering, right, and Trump might be the Antichrist and causing craft to prosper, and Trump saying he's going to pay for the Golden Ballroom that's going to sit 999 people, okay, his exact words, okay? But now all of a sudden the ballroom is going to cost $300 million, and look at this list of people who are funding it. Do you recognize some corporations and people that are on that list, Aaron?
Booz Allen Hamilton's an NSA company. Obviously, you've got all the big techs. Altria, I forget who that is, but you got Meta, Micron, Microsoft, Comcast, T-Mobile, Tyler Winklevoss. That's funny.
So you have crypto. You have the crypto boys. You have
the crypto
So you have
boys.
Tyler Winklevoss, Cameron Winklevoss. You have the Lutnick family, right? And Howard Lutnick was very much involved with Tether America, right? The cryptocurrency, USDT, right? And still involved with it to this day. And then you have Ripple, which Ripple's XRP, right? And you also have Coinbase, the major exchange, cryptocurrency exchange. Maybe some people would even say the number one American cryptocurrency exchange. We have the Adelson Family Foundation. We have Palantir. We have T-Mobile, who right now is one of the main cell phone providers working directly with Elon Musk and Starlink.
And what's crazy is these are some of the most unapologetic oligarchs in the world.
Yes.
And what's also crazy is they're mostly left-leaning. When you think about the actual,
in a lot of ways,
all these tech bros and stuff, they're all leftists. This is what's so crazy is how Christians are just turning the other cheek, turning the other, direction, while Trump is giving all these power to these super huge corporations. And it's like, remember, it wasn't that long ago when people were like, hey, Bill Gates is talking about population reduction.
Yeah.
These guys in Google, they're crazy. They're not just crazy. They're crazy and they're anti-Christian. And somehow Trump is just handing them the country on a silver platter. And everybody is just, they're totally fixated on, hey, we're getting rid of the brownies. All our prices are going up. Like,
Inflation 3% today. Rise, by the way.
Today or this year?
I mean, this month. I think the report that just came out today.
Like for the year or this month alone?
The government is claiming for this month in September only a plus 3% rise of inflation. Yes. That came out today.
Inflation rate hit 3% and expected. I think
Correct.
that's 3% for the year, but that's still high.
And they're saying they're unlikely to release inflation data next month. Now, of course, during the pandemic, it hit as high as close to about 9%, right? And
Yeah, I mean, food has kind of leveled out, and some
except
things
for
have.
beef. Except for beef. Beef.
Yeah, no, beef is. Yeah, I mean, I don't buy beef hardly at all anymore. Every now and then I'll go out and grab a steak, but it's like I went out and grabbed a steak dinner last night and a couple drinks, and it was like $70 with the tip. I'm like, you can't do that sustainably. So, but like pork products are getting pretty
Eggs are
inexpensive.
cheaper, but he's importing it.
They're leveling out. Eggs are leveling out. And I care about things like dense breads and proteins and stuff like that you need, and canned goods, and even ramen. Like I pay attention to stuff like that because I mean that's the stuff that you need.
Can you talk for a second? I do need to go outside real quick. I'm hearing.
Yeah,
something
go ahead.
outside.
Go ahead.
Shit, I'll be right back.
So that seems to be leveling out, and it seems to be pacifying most Americans into thinking like what's going on right now is good. It's overall good. I mean, we're getting rid of the riffraff. We're lowering crime. But even though there's all these abuses with illegals coming over here and then immediately flying a sign on the side of the road to get free money, I mean, those are abuses. Those are things that are wrong, and those people should be treated with the rules of the law. But how are they being treated with the rules of the law? That's still something that I think we as Christians were ultimately responsible for, and how we look the other way while they're being mistreated is ultimately going to come back on us on how we're going to be mistreated when this entire infrastructure gets handed over to leftists, because we don't know where this is going after this. But the way the left is kind of priming itself, the person who seems like they're going to try to run for the left in the next election is AOC. There's nobody on the Democratic side who seems like they're, credible and pulling weight and expressing leadership. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's like 1 billion years old, and AOC seems to be the new face of the left. So we're probably looking at something like a Trump versus an AOC in the next election, or somebody who might not win versus an AOC, and that might be the primer that they say, okay, if AOC wins, we're a freaking communist dictatorship, and she's going to take control of all this stuff. So we need to give Trump a third term. And like I said, this could always turn to Trump gets assassinated for taking a third term, or run out of the country for taking a third term, and then America becomes this turn against the Christians who gave Trump all this power, and all of a sudden all those camps that were built for the built for the illegals are now filled with Christians.
We're gonna get persecuted somehow by one of the sides, right? Or both of them in dual,
or both,
dual
or
persecution.
Both. You have one side saying, you turned against us with the left, and so you're in the camps, and then the other ones could say, well, you turned against you empowered the right, so you're in the camps. But it is going to look like the conscientious and moderate Christians who are looking at both sides of the things and not in the left-right paradigm, and especially those who espouse biblical eschatology, are going to be at the top of the list of people we need to get rid of. Why? If we're trying to be positive and fix this thing, and we can't be positive and fix this thing with all these negatudes who want to let the world burn. Speaking of positive Christianity, have you been keeping track of all the new Christians, the new famous Christians who are coming in?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I heard that Cat Williams is now a born-again Christian.
Okay, well, yeah, so I've had a friend send me Joe Rogan's Flirting with Christianity. Cat Williams was raised Jehovah's Witness. I listened to Cat Williams. Back in the day, I used to listen to a stand-up comedy and thought that he was insightful and funny.
Yeah.
And, Cat Williams is still espousing Jehovah's Witness, almost Christianese, almost Gnostic beliefs. Okay.
Which
if you listen to him, that's what he's saying. If you listen to what he's actually saying instead of what's being reported, that's what he believes and what he's stating. Okay. So I don't believe Cat Williams is born again.
I don't either.
Joe Rogan, I don't believe is born again. And so they're kind of still pushing, certain people to come out as Christians, but are not actually born again, in my opinion. And I do believe you can have worldly people that are born again. For example, I believe that DMX, though he died of drug use, I do believe that he was a genuine born again Christian. Now, a lot of people say, well, symbology in his albums and stuff like that and everything, and I understand that early on, but go listen to him read from and preach the gospel during the pandemic when he was holding live streams and what he truly believes. And I think that, he was, right? I could be wrong, but I think that he was, okay? Compared to someone like Cat Williams and what Cat Williams states that he believes and everything like that. So, again, I'm not saying for sure that DMX is born again or saved, but I would say I would not be surprised if I went to heaven and he was there, okay?
Well, Joe Rogan has been being courted by the Calvinists, it seems like, for a bit.
Yes, he is. And he had a dinner at Peter Thiel's house. Reason why he endorsed Trump was because Peter Thiel. He interviewed Peter Thiel,
and that's the thing, is like
election.
Peter Thiel also claims to be a Christian. So a Joe Rogan Christian is probably going to be much more like a Peter Thiel anyways.
I would agree, yes. And I've read what Peter Thiel actually believed that was leaked, and he is not a born-again Christian. He doesn't believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He just believes the Bible has good good teachings and good morals. Yeah,
ethical principles, the Thomas Jefferson Christians, right?
Correct.
Well, I mean, these people are just like, yeah, I'm anti-trans but pro-gay. Like, no, dude. Like, what's the difference? You're talking about a gay person who dresses up as a girl and a gay person who doesn't. Like, what's the difference between one and the other? Absolutely nothing. Well, the one can't go into the girl's bathroom. Like, stop, dude. Like, this is so least common denominator, right? Where it's just like, I'm fine with all your sexual perversion just as long as the kids and the women's sports are safe. It's like, it's insane to think, it's like, we're going to keep letting the root, we're going to leave the root in place and we're just going to keep trimming off the fruit. That's a lot of trimming because it's going to keep producing that. I mean, we've already seen this go full cycle in Europe where they got to the point where they had legalized animal brothels that were eventually shut down because of animal rights activists, not because this is sick as F, right? Like, like you could go bang a chicken or whatever, like legally. This passed through Congress in Germany and Denmark and places. Like, it was a bunch of countries that did this, where they're like, technically I don't see anything wrong with it. And so they licensed businesses to go have places where you could go bang a goat. Like, and then they said, then the debate was not, this is how the trans sports thing is. This is the absurdity of it. Well, can you really claim that the animal is consenting, though? And it turned into an issue of animal abuse rather than an issue of, you're sick. Where do you think STDs came from? Do you think humans having sex with humans, like, naturally produce diseases? We know this. You can go read Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. They know that STDs came from people who are having sex with animals. That's how a lot of germs and stuff transfer to people, right? Like, animals will have a virus and then a human who's hanging around with animals because they're a herdsman or whatever will pick up the virus. Well, sexual viruses came from people having sex with animals. And that's how they spread into humanity.
I would say some of them. I wouldn't say all of them. You also have bacterial related sexual transmitted diseases as well too, right? But I would say that some of it, yes, I could say could definitely be bestiality.
Yeah,
related.
I mean, there could be stuff just related to uncleanness, right? And then obviously any bacteria that can get in your ear or your eye can get in other parts too, right?
Because there's certain infections that are, between human to human primarily as well too.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but I'm saying there is stuff that have definitely come from humans having sex with animals.
Oh, very much so. I would agree to say that, yes.
But I mean, just the fact that, like, this is so sick, this is the stuff that God wiped out the Canaanites for, and the Europeans are like, well, sounds good to us. It's like, when you take away, I mean, it's such a simple thing. I had a friend try to ask me, like, well, what do you mean gay marriage is wrong? And I'm just saying, okay, Well, Jesus doesn't say that gay marriage is wrong. I said, yes, he does. He says, God made them male and female
Yeah.
for the purpose that a man would. It's very clear what he's saying. He made them male and female so that a man would leave his mother and father and cleave
Yeah.
to his wife.
Yeah.
That's simple. You don't be like, it doesn't say anywhere that cars aren't made for running people over. It's like, no, we made cars to transport people
And
across.
Jesus is also God, and God was firm that homosexuality is a sin. So I mean, both
Right.
in the Old Testament and the New.
There's nothing, but again, these people want to say I'm a Christian. I just don't follow Jesus. Like, and with the Russell Brands of the world, my number one thing. Now he has publicly, I heard him say something along the lines of the Bible says homosexuality is wrong. Like, I'll at least give him credit for that. I don't know if he's born again.
I don't believe he is. I've covered him many times on this channel. I still do not believe that he is.
But he's certainly trying to convince people that he is, and all that seems to be based around his public image of being, tagged in the Me Too movement, right? Like, once he starts getting accused as a rapist, and you're talking about a guy who's sexually out of control his whole life, he is constantly equating his testimony of coming to Christ with the fact that he was falsely accused of rape, right? Which is, and then of course the Christians who are interviewing him echo that, oh yeah, you went through a trial of being falsely accused, and that's when you came to Christ. Or he realized that his brand with the left was dead because Me Too was mostly a leftist thing, and so he shifted over to the Christians who are all about forgiveness, right? Like, it's not unheard of for people to glom onto the Christian market. I mean, look at Dave Ramsey. Look how much money he's made off of Christian audience. Look at Kanye West. He was doing that for a minute and selling fake gospel albums and really ridiculous looking Jesus is King t-shirts, right? Like, celebrities do this.
So
and
let me ask you this one to that point. Morris in the chat says, we cannot speak to people's salvation. We are not the judge. Christ is. And, Jesus said to judge righteously. 1 John 4 about testing the spirit. What does a person confess, right? If they have the Holy Spirit, they're going to confess that Jesus is God, right? They're going to confess certain things, and I understand if you're a babe in Christ, you might not understand the intricacies, completely of the Godhead or of, Scripture itself, right? Like, I understand that, okay? Like, but if someone's so-called, claims himself to be a Christian for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they contradict the basics of the gospel, I don't think they have the Holy Spirit in them. I just don't. So...
Yeah, here's the thing, is, for one, it's categorically untrue that we have to assume that people are saved just because they say they are, because the scripture does teach us that based on certain behaviors, we are to treat them as an unbeliever, right? Mm-hmm. So when we are called to treat them as an unbeliever, we're not supposed to assume that they are a believer, but treat them as an unbeliever. We're to assume that their behavior reflects that they're not. Right. So, I mean, I just met a Freemason the other night, tried to convince me he was a born again Christian. And then by the time I was like, I'm done with this guy, he's like talking about astral projection and stuff. He said he slept in a coffin overnight. He's saying he has outstanding, like, he's very much occultist. He's also talking about homosexuality being okay. And by the time I'm just like, I caught him lying probably like 3 or 4 times. I'm like, you just seem, full of crap. You're just a liar. I just keep catching you lying. And, eventually he was annoying me and I just walked away from him. As soon as I walked away from him, he was like, effing Christian, you think you're better than me and stuff like that. No Christian is going to call something an effing Christian. Like, no, only a non-Christian is going to say that,
well,
right?
I would say a Christian could in anger, but it wasn't something that they would continuously hold to for a very long period of time. There are things that we can say out of anger that we immediately regret,
Well, no, I'm not saying swearing. I'm saying effing Christian.
Yeah.
He identified me as a effing Christian,
yes,
which means
true.
he's not, right?
True,
like,
yes.
So he knew he wasn't a Christian, but he was trying to deceive me into thinking he was, when in fact he was a Freemason. He started out trying to convince me that Freemasonry was based in Christianity. And every time I would catch him lying on something and showing him where it wasn't compatible with Christianity, he would backtrack and say, I didn't say that, and I didn't do that, and I'm not really a part of it. He was just lying. He was just talking out of both sides of his mouth.
As a Freemason, they don't believe that Jesus Christ is the one and only Messiah. They don't believe that
right.
God
and
is
I've
God.
also met multiple witches and New Agers who will claim they're Christians.
Yeah.
There are people who claim they're Christians who are just straight out
That's why
lying.
we're called to test the scripture. We have biblical basis for that.
Right. So we're not called if somebody is just like, because a new ager or a witch will routinely call themselves a Christian and say we believe the same thing as you guys do. We just say it differently. Scientologists do the same thing.
Correct.
Right? Like all kinds of cults will do this.
Mormonism.
Right. So we do test people by what they say, and this is what First John is all about, is testing, them by their spirit, right? Like if they say Jesus didn't come in the flesh, they're not a Christian, even if they say they're a Christian and they're born again, right? They don't believe that Jesus came in the flesh. They have the spirit of Antichrist. They are not a Christian. So there are very clear lines drawn for us in the New Testament about, now I'm not about the guy going, I'm a fruit inspector and people need to prove to me that they are a Christian. I think you can get into a haughty, arrogant place.
Oh, very much so.
With that, but it's categorically untrue that we have to receive people as Christians if they just say they are. So that being said, Russell Brand, I mean, he, more than a lot of, I'll put it this way, more than Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or a lot of these other people are supposedly, Christian allies, we'll call them. Russell Brand at least sounds more like he believes he's a genuine Christian, but I don't think he is. I don't think Candace Owens is. And
they're also Catholics.
Yeah, I know for a certainty Peter Thiel's not.
No, not at all. He doesn't say he believes that Jesus Christ is the Messiah.
Right, but now Elon Musk is starting to be like, oh, I was baptized Anglican and blah, blah, blah. Of course you were. You were born in South Africa.
But being baptized specifically doesn't mean you're a born-again believer. So
no, and this is what people don't realize with Christian nationalism. This is what they want in America. An America where a bunch of people who never have anything to do with Christ can all say, yeah, of course I'm a Christian. I was baptized Anglican. This is the crap they want. They think this is better than having people who hate Christ actually being out in the open that they hate Christ.
Yeah.
At least if they're out in the open that they hate Christ, we can just be like, okay, well, we try to minister the gospel to them and we try to live amongst ourselves for the most part, right? We don't give our kids to them to educate, right? As much as we can legally prevent from doing it, right?
Yeah.
And within the sphere of the keeping the laws of the land and honoring God and honoring the king, we obey the laws, but we keep our kids from these people and we train them up in righteousness, and then we teach our kids when they're going to be around them as they get older to be like, hey, these people are going to be against God, and here's what they're going to say to you, and here's what they understand, and you train up a child in the way they should go, right? Like, at least it's clear. And you have people saying, no, we would rather have a bunch of fake Christians who aren't Christians running around naming the name of Christ and, getting rid of the extreme leftists, or silencing them. While you have a bunch of people calling themselves Christians who are fine with fornication, fine with homosexuality, but they're capitalists, right? They're big fans of capitalism and low taxes, right? And it's like their God is their belly, and they're just as bad as the leftists. They're just bad in a different way, right?
Yeah.
They just have different sins that they cleave to,
Well,
which is...
Well, it's the same with Morris in the chat, and who I love. I know you're Orthodox. I don't consider you a brother in Christ. He says we can look to fruits, but we don't know someone's eternal disposition with Christ. And I go, well, what constitutes a biblical fruit? That's a born-again believer. Like, you have to have a born-again believer to actually do what is considered to be fruit, right? And in doing so, they have the good work that they're doing, they have to glorify God. If they do a good work without glorifying God and take the glory from themselves, then that's not even fruit. And fruit takes slow. A fruit on a tree takes time to grow, right? Exactly, yes. So if you go to somebody first and you say, okay, well, what do you believe, which is testing the spirit? What do you confess? Okay, if someone says, like Peter Thiel, I don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, I believe the Bible is just sayings, well, that person is anti-Christ, all right, because they don't believe on the gospel. So you can look at somebody's fruits to the world. The Muslims appear to have good fruit to the world, right? But obviously it's not biblical fruit. They're quote-unquote good works don't glorify
patriarchal
God.
families, right? The wife submitted, they look on the surface, the wife is modestly dressed and submitted, and the kids are all, We get like they're honoring their father, and there's a patriarchal head of household. Boy, that looks a lot like what we in the Reformed Baptist camp are exemplifying as being next to godliness, right?
But
Like,
what do they believe? They don't.
yeah,
They
what?
don't believe the gospel.
Right, right. And so it isn't like, again, it's not like we're out to spy on people and like it's not our job necessarily to put them to the test, but we are to be discerning, and we are not to just assume somebody's a Christian just because they say they are.
Yeah, you know their heart by what they confess. The Bible is now you can't perfectly know. They could confess and even act godly but not be saved, right? But the thing is, I would accept that person as a believer. I don't know for sure. I would still pray for them,
Yeah.
But again, like
And a new believer can have wrong ideas in their head. That's not
correct.
necessarily the litmus. But when it's something like, but the point that I'm making is, don't swing the pendulum the other way and say you can't judge anything. When John's saying if they say this, they have the spirit of
And Jesus
Antichrist.
says to righteously judge.
Right. So we see things that are based on their behaviors, and we see things that are based on their testified beliefs that are definitely tests of whether or not they're a true Christian. And sometimes those, again, if I'm a Christian who falls into fornication, well, then we use church discipline to bring them back into obedience. But if I continually persist in fornication, then I'm probably not a Christian. It's the same thing with a false belief. If somebody comes at you with a false belief, you're just like, okay, a Christian can't hold that. You can't be a Christian and a Freemason because of what Jesus says here. And if they persist or lie or do all this other stuff, right, then it's like, okay, they're probably not a Christian. Because a Christian is not going to, have dual loyalties to a cult and to Christ and then lie about whether or not they've really taken the oaths that they just admitted taking, right? Like, so there are things that are just like, hey, there's no rule that says, thou shalt not judge somebody else's testimony. There are specific rules that say we are to judge in the body of Christ.
Or to judge righteously, not be hypocrites. And I'm not saying that we all get it right all the time. I'm not saying that. I fall short. Aaron falls. We all do. We all have preconceived biases.
It's not our job to try to look for reasons to exclude people. Well, again, we if it's wrong teaching or wrong behavior, we try to bring it into repentance, and then we test. How are they doing? Are they coming into repentance, or no? They're just being a little sneakier with their fornication, right? Like, so we try to learn those things. But I mean, when you take a guy like a Russell Brand who has been so New Agey, and New Agers are known to pretend to be Christians, right, and infiltrate and things like this, it's like, if I had him in an interview, I would be like, okay, do you think homosexuality is a sin? Boom, 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 boom. Like, I would walk him through a series of tests, because he's an intelligent guy. I can tell you he's read the Bible, and he's an intelligent guy. And, well, he's going to spin things towards the mystical and towards the Catholic and all this other stuff, because, the Catholic Church is a church that's built around people continuing in sin and just going to confession. Like, a lot of people who want to be called Christian but don't want to give their heart to Christ are fine with giving, their ritual obedience or head nods to something like a Catholic or Orthodox church. More so the Catholic Church in the West, I think. But that is a common thing, because there are more rites and there are more outward things that you can do to make yourself look like a Christian, while the heart is less changed than it would be and would be expected to be among. And I know a lot of evangelicals are getting just as bad in a lot of ways, just different ways. But in a church that was considered more evangelical, where people are teaching you to expect a heart change and a behavioral change that stems from a heart change, not just ritual obedience to sacraments. That's just the nature of, the different denominations and how they're expressed. I mean, we like I said, the evangelical church is getting pretty bad now, but I mean, we had a century of people calling themselves good Catholics while being mobsters, right? Like, it's not like this is something that we had going on so much in the evangelical churches, unless you count like the Branhamites and their KKK and bootlegging and stuff like that. But that's a fringe.
Or look at how much
people.
institutionalized pedophilia is being exposed in the Southern Baptist Convention right now.
Right, right. So again, large institutions is going to produce that, but again, fruit having this is why close fellowship and having accountable relationships with other Christians that can see both your behavior and your testimony is something that we should want to have as Christians. We should want to grow, and we should want to have open relationships where we confess into one another. And I can tell you, John and I confess into each other on a regular basis.
Yes.
You know, you should have those private relationships. You should also have open relationships. You know, I just sat down with a pastor at my church and talked about a sin issue that I had 6 months ago, you know, but it was like I felt the need to share it with him. Why? Because I don't want the other person to, I know I'm repentant. I don't know if the other person's repentant. So, you know, I wanted that known so this person couldn't go around, if they are a wolf in sheep's clothing, doing what they're doing, you know, and I know I'm okay with God, but I want to live in the light. I want to live in the open.
And I do believe there are people, as you discussed and that you mentioned, there are people that are saved and they're born again, but they have a sin unto physical death, you know? And again, is a person's heart right with, you know, God, as far as do they believe and trust on the Lord Jesus Christ? You know, like it takes, I mean, how long did it take David to repent of Bathsheba?
He had to get called out to his face.
Yeah, but it still took him a long time. And that was grave sin that he was in. You know, he got Bathsheba's husband murdered. He was committing adultery. You know, he was committing fornication. You know, I mean, it's... I say that a lot of Christians are probably there's, including myself, including us. We can look at our, you know, sometimes we should be more judgmental, and sometimes we should give more grace. And ultimately, to be honest, we don't know. But if someone does not confess believing the gospel, right, I'm not going to consider them to be a brother and sister in Christ. I'm not going to consider Peter Thiel a brother. I'm not. Because he says that Jesus Christ is not the Messiah.
Yeah. Yeah, and again with celebrities, it's like Chris Pratt, right? Chris Pratt comes and accepts Christ. Very publicly, you know, starts talking about his faith, and he went through a traumatic experience with a sick child, which is, you know, times people might get, you know, facing criminal charges and sick child are probably like the number one, number two. God, if you do this, I'll give my life to you, right? And he comes out and he's very public about his Christianity. Then people start putting him on the spot about, you know, hey, you're going to that church and that church is anti-gay, and he immediately is just like, hey, I don't believe everything that church believes. Well, wait a minute, do you believe what the Bible believes? Right? And then next thing you know, you see him in movies with sex scenes that he wasn't in before, and then movies where he's cussing a lot. And it's almost like going, well, who are you? Same thing with Matthew McConaughey. It's like, is he a Christian? Oh, look, maybe he is. But he is very comfortable talking about his roles playing a guy who's sleeping around. Right? His first breakout role, Christian Matthew McConaughey, was the famous line, I keep getting older and the girls stay the same age, right? Like, this is they're comfortable playing these characters that it's like, okay, so you're playing a pedophile. He's literally a guy saying, how's the new freshman crop looking, when he looks like he's probably 25, 30. Yeah. Right? He's a pedophile. Like, this is Matthew McConaughey's breakout role. This is how he got famous, okay? I'm a Christian. How I make my money is important. And if how I make my money is corrupting people towards sin while calling myself a Christian, I might have to give that some thought, right? Mm-hmm. And so again, people who are celebrities in public about their Christianity, in most cases I see a lot of Catholics like that. And then a lot of people who just are compromised. Maybe they're non-denominational or Baptist, but I mean, think about how many singers and stuff are like, oh yeah, I'm a Baptist, and it's like, okay, Britney, and people like that. Why do you act like a public whore? If you're a Christian, why are you dancing around with a snake like a stripper if you're a Christian, right? Like, how do you not have the discernment to go, they're not just making you look like a whore. They're making little girls who want to be like you think looking like a whore and showing as much skin as possible and dancing around seductively is okay for a Christian, right? I mean, it's like Friday Night Lights. I remember watching this, and I watched it years ago, and I go, this whole thing is about people who all go to church on Sunday and sleep around the rest of the week. Like, and they're praying, and they're praying before their football games, but then when, like, the daughter of the lead family, who's, praying before the football games and going to church every Sunday, starts sleeping with her boyfriend, the family's not even like, hey, this is wrong morally. There's no sense of that expressed, right? It's just normal. Like, Christians fornicate. This is just normal. And you go, why are you creating that? It's not that this hypocrisy isn't going on in this church, but why are we creating these shows that make it seem like these are good, wholesome family values, people who go to church who also fornicate and break laws and do all kinds of bad stuff that they do on the shows, right? Like, what you reflect to the world and as your testimony as Christian matters. How you make your money matters. Let your good deeds shine before men so that they'll glorify your Father in heaven. All that stuff matters. And if you look just like the world, at best, you are a Christian who's not really doing anything useful to God. At worst, maybe you're not a Christian. Maybe you're a nominal Christian. And the idea of nominal Christians has been a problem ever since infant baptism was introduced, ever since the idea of a philosophical Christianity, philosophical Gnostic Christianity were introduced. And those things came very early in the Catholic Orthodox Church. And we have a lot of historical testimony that says, it's not a coincidence that before infant baptism started becoming normalized, Christians would line up to die and face torture for the gospel, and would not back down under torture. And then after they introduced philosophical Christians in the East and infant baptism more in the West, Carthage and Rome, we find people getting certificates that say they gave a pinch of incense to Caesar, and people just giving a pinch of incense to Caesar, things that earlier Christians would never do.
Yeah.
Infant baptism created nominal Christians. And once you had a culture of nominal Christians, once it became the state religion, well, you just had gay Christians and fornicating Christians and Christians who are actually Gnostics and Christians that were closet pagans and still practice their pagan stuff and every last thing, which is why you're seeing these things reemerge in Europe as it becomes in vogue to, when the Enlightenment comes up around. It's not like these people were just like all of a sudden getting back into witchcraft for the first time. Like, they were into it the whole time. They just didn't do it publicly because, you had to be a Christian.
Well, that's what we're getting with the Christian nationalists. You could call it nominal Christianity, right?
Exactly. And nominal Christianities are real thing.
Mere Christianity, as C.S. Lewis wrote, right? Just enough, right? Just a veneer of it, right?
Right.
They're
Christ is king.
They and they want that peace and safety, so called, right? They want a society with peace and safety.
Yeah, good, wholesome family values. And the Nazis were all about good, wholesome family values.
But what's really going on? That's the thing is these people want this and they expect it's going to happen through law and order. But in reality, like, again, I don't know. To me, it's
Our
ludicrous.
changes come through you dying and Christ living in you. It's that simple. And it is ugly because we do make mistakes and we do keep stumbling forward, but it does become beautiful as you see that this is real and this is not some nominal thing. This is not, I can tell you I kind of gave my life to Christ when I was facing prison time when I was a teenager. I really gave my life to Christ after I completely crashed out in a mental hospital a few years later. Because the first time I thought I was going to straighten myself out and I realized I couldn't. And the second time I realized that with God's help, I can supernaturally be set free from porn addiction and things like that.
Only God, right? God is who does the work in us, the author and finisher of our faith.
Right.
Proverbs 24:16, to your point, for a righteous man may fall 7 times and rise again, but the wicked
Right.
shall fall by calamity, you know? So, I mean, there's, I would consider someone who is struggling, through sin, as we all do, and they're going, okay, I know this is sin, but I'm struggling with it. I would consider them, I would still be concerned, obviously, but we all struggle with sin. I'm not going to say that we don't, okay? But I
Right.
would be less concerned compared to someone who's like, I'm a drunkard and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a homosexual and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a pornographer and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a thief and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Then that would be far more concerning to me.
Yeah. And how they respond when they're confronted on sin and false doctrine, which we're supposed to do in the church, is exemplary of whether or not they're saved. I can tell you, I've never hardened my heart once as a Christian against somebody who's called me out on sin. I might not listen to them immediately because I'm, in sin. And, it's usually like, well, I want to see this girl and, I have a right to do this and blah, blah, blah. But when God convicts me that it's sin, I'm never going to be like, well, I don't like that guy because of how he said it, right? Like, when he's like, you're sinning. It's like, but I've experienced people be like that with me. Well, they're sinning and they don't want to change. And then they turn you into the enemy for pointing out their sin. When the reality is the most loving thing you can do to a person is point out their sin.
Okay.
Is to say that's sin, and here's what the Bible says, you shouldn't do that. There's nothing more loving that you can do. It's like somebody who's pointing out to you that, hey, this thing you're spending your money on is a scam, right? You're calling me stupid. No, I'm telling you this thing you're spending your money on is a scam. Like, I don't gain anything from telling you that. No, that's your pride telling me that. No. I'm helping you not throw your money away. And it's the same thing with, your walk with God. I'm helping you not throw your testimony away if you are saved. Or if you're not, well, then I want you to know that you're not, so you get saved, because it's just a matter of you coming to Christ with your whole heart, holding nothing back and saying, save me. And he will. He promises to. So those are things that we're called to do, and unfortunately the churches don't do them, and that's why we have nominal Christianity. That's why we have, check boxes that, people put in place of sincere, authentic living in openness in the light of the Lord. And now we have institutionalized that because you've had a lot of people who've glommed on and equated Christianity with capitalism. And the first people to do that were liberal leftists. This is the ironic thing. It's the Republican platform now, but it was originally a Democratic platform.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what nominal Christianity is. A church full of Christians who are born again but live like the world, who are carnal, and people who claim that they're Christian but aren't born again.
Right.
That's the best that nominal Christianity can get. And it seems like that we're being pushed to that through Christian nationalism and Christendom.
We are. And it's, again, I don't see us ever being in a place where, like, we're a long-term V for Vendetta Christian nation. What I see it being is something that's going to foment mostly rhetorically, and then it's going to be turned against real, authentic Christians, turning into a worldwide persecution. That's what I see coming. That's what I believe the scriptural prophecies, specifically Christ in Matthew 24 and Luke 21, that's what I see coming. How long it will occur, or how long before we get to that, could be a few years. Could happen during the Trump administration. I don't see the Trump administration going after any Christians right now, but they're already kind of turning on them by basically saying the Christians who are concerned about the Epstein stuff are basically brainwashed by a Democratic, talking point. I mean, they're already turning on a lot of the Christian base of Trump, who are concerned with pedophilia by powerful people as, something every person should be concerned with. So, but then now those same people are, allying with the Catholic Church and holding arms in arms with them, when we know they still have a massive pedophilia problem. There's no way they clean that up.
Well, in closing, and I do got to go, but I want to ask your opinion on this. Did you follow James Dobson a lot? Because I've been talking a lot about him, and being involved in the Council for National Policy and everything like that. Have
I've
you?
seen your videos, and he used to have radio broadcasts and stuff, so I know more based on his public image, and focus on the family was always something that, again, back when I would listen to stuff like that, I wouldn't have been as primed to consider, the political motivations and what is this. So I can't say anything about him positively or negatively.
Yeah, because I was going to ask about, him kind of moving towards politics very strongly and being on like Trump's evangelical group, right, and stuff like that and everything,
Yeah.
up until his death, right? I mean, that's a major problem, and you have James Dobson and Council for National Policy member Chuck Colson participating in that 2000 conference with the Vatican.
Yeah, Catholics and evangelicals together.
Yep.
Which he's probably neither of those things. But yeah, he's a Republican Nixon administration involved in the Watergate scandal. And he says he went to prison and that's when he got saved.
Mm-hmm.
I actually almost went to work for his, is it Prison Fellowship Ministries? Is that his ministry?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, I actually almost went to work for them years ago. I don't know. I mean, again, compromise and stuff like this. There are certain things where people are like, are there Christians who are born again in the Catholic Church? I would say yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think, Catholic churches do a lot of charity work, and I think there's certain things. I mean, let's face it.
But I would say it's few and far between, though. They should come out of the Catholic Church, right?
Right, but I mean, most evangelicals are anti-abortion, and that movement was led by Catholics.
Yeah.
You can't get around that. I mean, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination in America, was pro-abortion. They weren't. I mean, they were liberal Democrat, pro-abortion Democrats, and it was the Catholic right to life movement that turned evangelicals towards being activists on being anti-abortion, which the early church always was. Mm-hmm. So it's like, if we do have a vote, and that a vote can produce, anti-abortion legislation, I don't see any problem with voting that way. However, if somebody's using that single talking point as a way to, not really do anything to affect abortion and get you to endorse a Nazi police state, then that's when you need to use discernment and go, is this really worthwhile voting for? Because let's face it, have we slowed down abortion since Roe v. Wade was overturned? I mean, no. I don't know. I don't have the data.
No. The thing that's I looked at the data. The thing that slowed down, and it wasn't completely overturned. It was only returned to the states, right?
Right.
But if you look at the data, what slowed it down was the pandemic. It's back up now.
Right, and then most states then turned it back towards pro-abortion, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and they waited. The Republicans could have overturned this back in the 70s. But they waited until the point where the culture had shifted towards being so pro-abortion, because we had such a culture of licentiousness that, God, we would all be bankrupt if we had to take care of the babies we made, right? And it's like, no, you would just have to be responsible and stop partying until you're 30 and then settling down to have a kid after you've had 25 sex partners, or 2,500 nowadays, 250, right? So, like, yeah, they could have changed it years ago, but they waited until it was a non-issue and basically just something. It's kind of like they could have taken out Osama bin Laden right in the beginning, but they waited until they could use it for an election, right?
Yeah,
that's always what they're doing. But the direction of our country has been, the fast progressivists or the slow progressivists. Those have been the two moves. That's been our synthesis, antithesis, right? It's just about turning America more and more away from God, but, one side's doing it fast and the other side's doing it slow. And so the side that's doing it slow seems conservative when the reality is like, no, they're just less progressive. And now they're not really that they're not really that conservative at all, except on capitalism. Let's be honest, that's the only thing they're really conservative about.
Yeah, it's right here. It's in 2 years since the Supreme Court ruled overturning Roe versus Wade. The most recent data shows in 2024 there was 1.14 million abortions, up from 1.05 million abortions in 2023.
Say those numbers again.
2024 was 1.14 million, 2023 was 1.05 million.
Okay. And what are those numbers? What did those numbers used to be in the years before?
They've been steadily going down since the 70s, from what I've seen. I could be wrong about that, but again, the statistics are all over the place, and statistics, you can make it seem like anything, you know. So
Yeah, they said they've been declining. They said 14 abortions per 1,000 women, but then they don't count the morning after pill.
correct.
So it's easier to get an immediate abortion versus, an abortion that you have to get a medical procedure to get. So 2023, 2024, the abortions increased to 1.14 million, 930,000 in 2017. So I don't see how that's going down. They say, 5% decline from the same period in 2024. So over the past year. Well, this year's not even over, though.
Yeah.
So we see a rate of, 19.9 abortions per 100 births in 2021, 2022, whereas in 2017, the average was 14 per 1,000 births. 14 per 1,000 women. I don't understand. These are different. I'm just looking at Google, and
That's what I'm saying. The statistics are all over the place. They're all over the place.
They're not using consistent metrics from year to year.
Exactly. We really don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say we're probably pulling an easy, safe 1 million abortions a year.
I would assume so.
Which is really sick, because if you just take the aborted babies, that's literally all the population that we needed to replace with illegal immigrants. Easily over the past 25 years.
I mean, and it's going to continue. I mean, it's a tragedy.
Right, and these are things that God definitely cares about, because you're talking about murder as a standard. So yeah, it's like, I get voting over that issue, and that was something that Catholics champion. And so when I look at the 7 churches in the Book of Revelation, I do believe it's talking about different eras of Christianity, but also specific Christian groups. And I think when we look at the last 4 letters, one is Thyatira, one is Sardis. I mean, the church that marries to the state, which I think is, what's the one that means thoroughly married? It's the one before the Catholic one. I believe that represents the Orthodox Church. I believe Thyatira represents the Roman Catholic Church. I believe Sardis represents the Reformation Church. I believe Philadelphia represents the Evangelical Church. And then I believe Laodicea represents the commercialized megachurch.
Big evangelical.
Which I wouldn't even call it evangelical anymore. I would call it entertainment church is what it is.
Corporate church.
Corporate church, yeah, the church industrial complex. I think the first one, Ephesus, represents the apostolic church. The second one represents the, heavily persecuted church from the, 1st through the 3rd centuries. And then the next one represents the church that married the Roman state. The next one represents the Pope taking over everything, which is, and it's largely based around Mariology, which is why you have Jezebel at the top. And then the next one is, the ones who have a name that they're alive, but they're dead, which are the nominal Christian reformers who are overthrowing governments, burning witches, killing Anabaptists, and basically trying to start a new world order while claiming it's all in the name of Christ. So that's your Christian nationalists. The Philadelphians are the ones who are brotherly love, which Philadelphia itself was founded by the Quakers, which are one of the 3 main seed groups of evangelicalism, which was the Pietists, the Quakers, and the Anabaptists. Those are the 3 groups. One was kind of the more charismatic, the other was bringing the born again experience, and the third was bringing believers baptism. And it was those three ingredients, with Philadelphia actually as their major hub. It's New Jersey and Philadelphia, but it was the religious freedom that was allowed in the Quaker state that allowed for those things to mix and become the Great Awakening. Mm-hmm. And then, the Great Awakening continued to produce the majority of the world's global missionaries in evangelicalism until you get to the 20th century, when the industrialized televangelistic church starts to emerge, starting mostly with the Pentecostals, but then rolling over into the Baptists, the Reform, and then the Leadership Network, the Growth Networks, and now just the celebrity pastor culture. And I think that's Laodicea. And I think that's the last part. And Laodicea takes us right into, right up to the rapture, basically. So,
Sounds good.
so that's my particular interpretation. That interpretation has not been foreign to futurists, but you have to kind of be in the present to be able to see it. You have to be through church history, and I line that up with the the seven kingdom epistles in Matthew 13. And if you put them side by side, you can interpret the symbols that way. And that's in my Revelation book if you're interested in that.
All right, sounds good. Tell everybody where they can find you real quick, Aaron.
So I'm at Underground Publishing. Just look for the Batman face, and then I'm going to be teaching on Christian nationalism. Probably just doing some stuff in the Psalms and the Proverbs between now and the new year, and then by New Year I'm going to be probably touching up and republishing my Apostles' teaching, which is the New Testament, in chronological order, and then we're going to be going through that next year, just like I just finished up the entire Old Testament with all the prophets and everything put in chronological order. And then I'm going to be teaching on Christian nationalism. I teach on church history, and then I've got 3 books available on Amazon. I'm working on a 4th book called A Serpent by the Way, which is basically a history of paganism that goes from the pre-flood world to pretty much Gnosticism around the time of Christ. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube, and you can support me on Patreon if you want, or if you are a Patreon supporter, you'll actually get free access to digital copies of my books. So that's my living now, and you know, I'm going to keep doing this until they shut us down, or you know, we go into the camps or whatever we're going to do.
Sounds good to me, brother. All right, everybody. God bless. I'll see you later.
All right, thanks for having me, John.
You're welcome, Aaron. You all take care. Bye. All right. We
Hey.
are off.